Thank you for attending the Interagency Working Group meeting on forestry cooperatives. Co-ops can work in any sector of the economy. Meetings we have held since 2022 address how cooperatives work in food, housing, care, and other industries, as well as cooperative statistics. Interagency Working Group on Cooperative Development website has funding, partner organizations, tools, and resources for cooperatives. Please review our Cooperative Services website that includes publications and other information to help with cooperative development. If you are unable to find information, please email coopconnect@usda.gov. In the service of time, we will keep introductions short with our distinguished panel. Their full bios are available in the Gov Delivery Bulletin where you receive this invitation and at the end of this PowerPoint that we will share out after our meeting. It is my honor to introduce J.R. Clays. He serves as administrator of the Rural Business Cooperative Service, RBCS, in USDA Rural Development. Administrator Clays most recently served in the Kansas legislature, where he worked extensively on rural economic development policy and state budget issues. His experience includes creating rural lending and grant programs targeting major agricultural and aerospace manufacturers. Prior to running for office, he made his career in small business advocacy, working in communications, public affairs, and executive management for national associations representing businesses. Administrator Clays earned his bachelor's degree from Kansas State University and holds an MPA in Nonprofit Association Management from the George Washington University School of Business. Administrator Clays, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you for that introduction, and thank you all for your participation in the Cooperative Working Group today. Cooperative development is a foundational pillar of the Rural Business Cooperative Service here at USDA. We exist to strengthen rural economies through locally owned and democratically governed business models, from farmer-owned dairies to rancher-run marketing associations. This is something that everyone here at RBCS, Secretary Rollins, and President Trump prioritize. Just 3 weeks into her tenure as Secretary of Agriculture, Secretary Rollins traveled to the National Electric Cooperatives Conference in Georgia, where she promised cooperatives that the USDA will actively cut red tape and leverage the president's executive orders to generate projects of direct concern to both rural America and cooperatives. The 2014 Farm Bill required the Secretary of Agriculture to foster cooperative development and ensure coordination with federal agencies and national and local cooperative organizations that have cooperative programs and interests. Since then, we have prioritized delivering to rural cooperatives the resources and technical assistance they need to operate and thrive. RBCS supports co-ops through education, outreach, cooperative development centers, ag co-op statistics, co-op month events, and of course this group assembled here today. And we have a number of programs in RBCS that support cooperatives directly. Today we're here to discuss ideas for strengthening the cooperative business model. We're joined by forest industry representatives with technical assistance provided by the Forest Service Cooperative Development Center. Their success has shown how communities drive collaboration to safeguard local industries. I know that Rural Business Cooperative Service can be a resource and catalyst for cooperatives into the future. And again, thank you for the honor of addressing you today.
Thank you, Administrator Clays. And Margaret Bow is our moderator, and we will turn it over to her.
Very good. Thank you, Robbie, and thank you, Administrator Clays, for that introduction. I've been asked to share just a little bit of information about the possibility of economic prosperity through forestry cooperatives. Next slide. And I wanted to share with you part of the journey that I personally have taken and is an example of of the use of the co-op model in the forest products industry. The Wisconsin Rapids Pulp and Paper Mill on June 9th of 2020, it was announced that it would be shuttered. And that was a major blow because that particular mill, as shown there, which is incidentally 20 miles downstream from where I live in Stevens Point, Wisconsin, that particular mill processed 25% of all the timber harvested in Wisconsin, the UP, the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, and into Lower Michigan. Next slide. And that mill has had, it's a long-standing mill, and for over 100 years, it was owned and operated by a local family, and it was called Consolidated Papers. But then in the year 2000, it started a cycle, a merry-go-round of different ownership. It was owned by a company from Finland. It was their first attempt in the US market. And then it was sold to a private equity firm called New Page. They declared bankruptcy, and then it was sold to yet another private equity firm called Verso. And as I mentioned, on June 9th, 2020, there was an announcement that by the end of July, that entire complex would be closed. But that day, later in the afternoon, all the loggers and the logging truckers received a phone call to immediately cease delivering timber. Next slide. So these three gentlemen were instrumental in, they came together in the story goes, in the conference room of the Great Lakes Timber Professionals Association meeting room. And Dennis Shenik, a long-standing logger, said, "We as loggers need to own that mill, and we will do it as a cooperative." So let me give you a little bit of background on that. Next slide. Uh, this slide was put together by Don Peterson, and he mentioned that there have been numerous mill closings across Michigan and Wisconsin over the last 20 years. And most of the large mill owners were international in scope or private equity firms, and they didn't quite have the concern for the local communities, the workforce, and the vitality of our North Woods. And as Don recognized here in the slide that he created, that quick profit motivation is not a good match for the long-term horizon that is needed in the forest products industry. Next slide. So I had the opportunity in the year 2012 to go to Quebec to learn about some of the cooperatives going on in that province. And on a off-chance conversation I had with Michel Clement, he shared a story that was inspiring and that I shared with Don Peterson and some of the other loggers years ago. And it must have registered with them. So next slide, please. There is a little town called Sacré-Cœur, Sacred Heart in English, and it's on the north shore of the St. Lawrence River. It's pretty remote, and it's a town of less than 2,000 people, and that town was truly a sawmill town. Next slide, please. And so what happened was that that particular sawmill was built in 1975. And over the period of a decade, it changed ownership hands 3 times. It went into bankruptcy several times. And after the third bankruptcy and the mill sat idled for 30 months, the townspeople said, enough. We need to take ownership of this mill, which is central part of our economy in our region. And so the people came together along with the local economic development folks and a credit union system that's very popular in Quebec. And they formed something called Bois-Saco. Bois means wood in French. And it was what we would call a multi-stakeholder cooperative today. Back then, in 1985, that language didn't exist, but it is a combination of a cooperative of loggers called UNESCO, or of COFOR of loggers, UNESCO of the mill workers, and then a little investment group of local people. And they bought that mill for pennies on the dollar when it was in bankruptcy court. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned, that ownership makeup, it's a three-way ownership of the workers in the loggers, a worker co-op of the mill workers, and then that investment co-op. 432 small shareholders, and they wanted to make sure that no one family could own more than 5% of the shares in this mill. Next slide. And they created a board of directors, and it very much reflects the ownership. You've got representation from the worker co-op of loggers, the worker co-op of mill workers, and the local investors, plus the credit union system representative. Next slide. And what's interesting, and which has given inspiration to some of the work that we've done here in the upper Midwest and in Maine, is the distribution of profits via their cooperative. And if you look, they, from the very beginning, put 55% of all their profits each year into a development fund to further the sawmill and other things to strengthen their local economy. Next slide. So with that reinvestment, they have been thriving. It's been 40 years since Boisaco formed, and they have created, you've got the original sawmill, and they have created 7 different companies that use byproducts, waste, or other streams of the logs that are harvested. You've got the original sawmill, then they are making high density door panels for interior doors. They create horse bedding. They have the components from wood pallets. They also make wood pellets for heating. They have lumber brokers. And they also just started a white birch firewood. They could not use the white birch, the small white birch, for other things. So they have a high value firewood that they are creating. And by having investment in all different types of entities that use the wood that is harvested, they have been able to survive the boom or bust cycle that is inevitable with being in the forest products industry, especially a sawmill, especially with variations in the housing industry. Next slide. So here's a picture of that sawmill 2 years after it was built. Next slide. And here it is today, a couple years ago actually, and you could see the sawmill, but then you can see the other entities that they have created over time to support themselves. They are now employing over 600 people. In a community of about 2,000 people in the region, and they are about 30% of the tax base for the community. Next slide. So just wanted to share the basics of what is a cooperative. As a co-op developer, I can't help myself but do that. A cooperative is a business that is owned and democratically controlled by the people who use its services. So, and then the benefits of that cooperative are returned to the member owners based on the use of the cooperative in the previous year. Next slide. So why would you want to use a cooperative form of business for the forest products industry? I would argue that longevity is needed for a natural resource industry. The research at USDA Rural Development into agricultural cooperatives has gone on for almost 100 years. And that research shows us that over 75% of all U.S. agricultural cooperatives are 50 years old or older. And in fact, 1 out of 5 co-ops, agricultural co-ops, are at least 100 years old. So that's staying power, and that type of vision is what's needed in a natural resource industry. Cooperatives allow for individual entry and exit from the business without upsetting the entire business. And it is a proven model shown by our rural electric co-ops, our agricultural cooperatives, and the credit unions. And I'm going to share a slide as a tongue-in-cheek joke. Next slide, please. And in Wisconsin, we tend to understand cooperatives. The Green Bay Packers are not a cooperative, but they're as close to a cooperative as we have in professional sports. I couldn't help myself but to share that little side note. So with that background about some of the inspiration that we learned about cooperatives in the forest products industry, I would like to introduce to you Henry Scheinebeck. He is the executive director of the Great Lakes Timber Professionals Association, and he was one of that holy trinity that came together upon the announcement of the closing of the Verso Mill in Wisconsin Rapids. So, Henry, I turn it over to you.
Thank you, Margaret, and appreciate everybody being here today and having this event put together. So Margaret gave you a really good background, and I can still remember the day that a couple of guys called and said, "Hey, the mill is shutting down. They're turning our trucks around, and where are we going to go with our wood?" Cooperatives, we have talked about them in the past quite a bit. And it really started several years ago as we saw the land ownership change. Previously, ever since I was in the business self-employed, the companies like Consolidated Paper and Nakusa Edward Papers Company, they own hundreds of thousands of acres of land. And as we saw them sell off their land, we kind of started to see this shift in ownership of the mills, as Margaret pointed out. Many of them were purchased. In fact, almost all of them were purchased by foreign entities and not necessarily caring so much about the local community, the forest resource, that type of thing. But from our perspective, really purchasing the market share of the products that they were producing. And what that did in total was it really presented some lack of dependability for the loggers to have a place to ship their wood. And really, it's having an impact on our forest resource as we're seeing markets kind of disappear. So GLTPA, Great Lakes Timber Professional Association, we are a two-state organization, three basically, with the Great Lakes, Michigan, Wisconsin, Minnesota. We have a lot of members there as well. And we have our association divided into 7 regions. So Don Peterson, Dennis Shenik, and I, we took to the road, and we had a meeting in every one of those regions and did a presentation. Margaret was part of a lot of those. That was kind of during the COVID times. So every now and again, we had a little bit of technical difficulties getting Margaret in, but she taught us well, and we really understood her presentation. So we went on the road and we asked all of our members, "What do you think? Do you want to try getting into this co-op and really taking our destiny into our own hands?" That's one of the things that I think loggers are very passionate about is really making sure that they have somewhere to go with what we're growing. So that's what we did. Decided to form the co-op. From there, we went on and started looking at actually forming the co-op, coming together with bylaws, those types of things. There were a lot of people that were involved, and we started doing a lot of market research right off the get-go, trying to figure out, could we really do this? Could we pull it off? And we did a lot of, after the co-op was formed, we worked hard to try to buy a couple of the mills that were shut down, because actually at that very same time, there were 3 mills that shut down in the region. The one in Wisconsin Rapids that Margaret talked about, there was one in Duluth, Minnesota, and another one in a small town of Park Falls, Wisconsin. So we lost quite a bit of market share. In fact, right now we're down about 3 to 4 million tons of market share that we once had with those mills being open. And it really opened up a door for the cooperative to form. We'd looked at cooperatives in the past, but when you have strong markets, there's really not a lot of push to do it. These mills closing really pushed us over the edge to get this done. So it was a long, I would say kind of a long process, but relatively short process if you compare it to some government work. Not to be disrespectful, but sometimes it just takes a long time to do things when you're working through different agencies. I know we've been working on truck legislation for like 13 years and we still don't have it done yet. So this project moved ahead relatively quickly. And we had a lot of support from Congress with the grant money that they put in the budget. A lot of support from Margaret from USDA, different folks. So it's been, like I say, it's been a relatively short process compared to other things. And we're really hoping to expand on this at some point in time. But yeah, that's kind of how it all came together. And we had many, many, many meetings. There was a lot of folks like Dennis that really volunteered their time and put a lot of effort into it. I mean, I was self-employed for 32 years before I took the job I have now. So I know the type of time and energy and expense it takes to get people involved in it that care about the resource. And ultimately for us, it always gets back to the resource of trees and the fact that we're growing a lot. We need a place to go with it, and forest health is at stake here. So with that, I'll turn it back to you, Margaret.
Thank you so much, Henry, for that perspective and for your leadership as well. We always relied upon Henry. He has a sixth sense for if something's worth pursuing or not. So thank you, Henry. And next up, we have Dana Duran. He is the Executive Director of the Professional Logging Contractors of the Northeast. And he's joining us from Maine. And they're doing some very interesting things in Maine with similar situations. So Dana, welcome.
Thank you, Margaret. Appreciate the opportunity to be here, and thanks to USDA for putting this together. I think it's an important topic, and hopefully the folks that are online will learn a lot. USDA asked me not so much to talk about the cooperative situation in Maine. You're going to hear a little bit later from a representative of the cooperative here in Maine, but talk a little bit about what's happened with the industry and changes in markets in the Northeast. And so I'm just going to give a brief overview of what's really transpired in the Northeast since 2020, similar to what's happened in Wisconsin. But first, I'll just give brief background on our organization. Professional Logging Contractors of the Northeast is a nonprofit educational association that works on behalf of the timber harvesting and hauling community. Organization's been around for about 30 years now and has about 250 contractor members in the Northeast, specifically in Maine, New Hampshire, Vermont, and New York. Started in the state of Maine back in 1995. So that's just a little bit of background regarding the organization. But just for folks online, if they're not aware, so similar to what transpired in 2020 to Wisconsin, we also had a similar situation in the state of Maine specifically. It wasn't enough to just have a global pandemic, but we also had major mills that went down in the year 2020. So in April of 2020, the Pixel mill, which there must be something about a relationship of Verso, but because Wisconsin also dealt with a Verso mill potentially closing down in later in the summer of 2020. But the Pixel mill in Maine, which had previously been owned by Verso and was built by International Paper, it had two digesters. It was a traditional pulp and paper mill. It had two digesters in its pulping process, and those two digesters had a sudden and catastrophic explosion in April of 2020. What that meant was that mill consumed 2 million tons of fiber, 1 million tons of roundwood, 500,000 tons of sawmill residuals, and 500,000 tons of biomass. What that effectively meant was 67,000 loads of wood would never be delivered to that mill again. And that 67,000 loads a year went into that J facility. So it was a catastrophic moment for the facility, and the folks from Pixel decided they weren't going to rebuild that mill. And if you visited J in that location today, it is vacant. That entire facility has practically been torn down. So, that occurred in 2020. We also obviously dealt with an international pandemic at the time, which was curbing forest products, especially on the pulp and paper side. We all know what happened with building construction and renovation. So those products were still flying off the shelf. But on the consumable side with pulp and paper, it certainly had a major impact. Later in March of 2023, the Nine Dragons facility in Old Town, Maine announced it was closing. That facility also consumed about 2 million tons of fiber. So in a 3-year time frame, you lost about 4 million tons of wood into those two mills alone. So it has had a kind of a disastrous impact upon the logging and trucking industry. We also know what happened with inflation, or has happened with inflation, on the cost of goods and services. We now know because of inflation, our interest rates have gone up. Building construction hasn't stopped, but it certainly has been curbed significantly. So not only did we have what has occurred with pulp and paper, we've had inflation on parts, equipment, labor, et cetera, and now building construction and building starts have been slowed significantly. So the markets for loggers and truckers in the Northeast has certainly been impacted. We have lost, at this point, about 40% of the logging capacity in the Northeast. Not just Maine, but New Hampshire, Vermont, New York has been lost over the last 5 years because of all of these significant market impacts. So, I think we are hopeful. The future is bright. We've got new products on the horizon. We have wood that's being used to make insulation now at a mill in Maine. We have mills that are looking at using wood for biofuel replacement. The Sappi mill in Maine has put about $450 million into its facility to change its line. Nine Dragons has done significant impact or investment. So, I think we're bullish on the future, and we have a phenomenal forest that's growing probably 3 times as much wood as we have a market for. So the future is bright. But I think that as Wisconsin has done, there's folks in Maine looking at doing similar things, because there needs to be kind of a redirect as to how things are going to be done in the future. So that's just a little bit of background on what has transpired in the Northeast, what's happened to markets, and what's happened to the logging and trucking workforce. So with that, I'll turn it back over to Margaret.
Thank you so much, Dana, for that background. That's really helpful to know. And it's it's a very similar situation to the upper Midwest. Thank you for that. Next up, we have Kelly Maynard. She is a cooperative development specialist with the University of Wisconsin Center for Cooperatives. And the two of us worked hand in hand with helping to support the Timber Professionals Cooperative that was formed in Wisconsin and Michigan. So Kelly, please, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Margaret. And both Margaret and Henry have done a great job painting a lot of the background picture of what's happened here. So some of what's on this slide they've already referred to. Henry with the Great Lakes Timber Professionals Association, this robust existing entity through which a lot of the loggers, logging truckers, and others in the supply chain were organized. And then Don Peterson with Renewable Resource Solutions. And so getting into a little bit of the nitty-gritty of the co-ops that were developed. So the decision, as this mill in Wisconsin Rapids was in the process of being shut down, they formed the Timber Professionals Cooperative. For folks, the co-op wonks, in Wisconsin, we have two co-op statutes. Chapter 185 is a very kind of traditional form of cooperative, although our law in Wisconsin is quite broad and progressive in terms of types of co-ops that can be formed. And then there is another type of co-op in it that some refer to, the common language across the country is limited cooperative association, or LCA. And in Wisconsin, the relevant statute is Chapter 193. In any event, that allows for there to be non-patron or oftentimes investor members in a cooperative. And the Timber Professionals Co-op, or TPC, is our kind of more traditional co-op. They formed as a non-stock cooperative to really be this kind of like organizing and scouting entity for identifying mill opportunities, the first of which was this Wisconsin Rapids mill. And the consolidated cooperative, this is a bit chronological. So this was the first co-op that was created that intended or had hoped to purchase this mill in Wisconsin Rapids. And it was the Chapter 193. It was going to allow for membership across the supply chain. So loggers, logging truckers, logging equipment suppliers, forest owners, but also the workers at the mill. Henry spoke to the scale of this mill in terms of, how much timber volume it used to process. It also represented 900 jobs, 900 people working there that were represented at the time before it closed by 6 different unions. And the number of, because that represented such an enormous economic hit to that relatively small community, the number of different, task forces, pulled together by, congressional leaders and others was a lot. There were meetings about what was going to happen in Wisconsin Rapids and with this mill almost daily. And Margaret, being based in Wisconsin, already in conversation and with deep relationships to Don and Henry and others, pulled me in. And so we were working side by side on the kind of general co-op education for the folks that were part of TPC, and then forming consolidated cooperative, lots of conversations about the Boysaco model and what they had done there, about how co-ops work in Wisconsin, about our statutes, and we helped identify a lot of other relevant professionals. So in the process of developing the articles of incorporation and bylaws for consolidated, and then the Park Falls Mill cooperative, as Henry alluded to, was another smaller mill that was shutting down at the similar time. So we leaned heavily on the support of some very experienced cooperative attorneys and accountants to make a lot of really key decisions that went into those articles and bylaws. The amount of redlining that went on before that we had final versions was a lot, but it was good. It all resulted in really important conversations. And then much more, unfortunately, the Verso, the firm, was then purchased by a large Swedish company, and that didn't even want to speak with the consolidated cooperative. And that mill, purchase never came to fruition. And at this point, I just learned from Margaret that this mill is actually being torn apart. Which is hugely unfortunate. Park Falls Mill, instead of continuing its life as a mill, was converted to a cryptocurrency mine, also a huge loss. But now a newer co-op was formed I believe it was in 2023 or 24, the Timber Professionals Cooperative Enterprises. So again, using one of our traditional co-op statutes in Wisconsin, and they are very close, probably to purchasing a chip mill. It's a smaller scale than the consolidated co-op project that Wisconsin Rapids Mill would have been, but a lot of these same players, Dennis, Henry, and others, and Laura, who's on this call, been instrumental in all the planning and work that have gone into that. Margaret and I played a role in helping with articles and bylaws for that, and are kind of, on an ongoing basis, helping answer questions about the co-op model for the board, and and kind of program managers or project managers for it. And so I definitely, for folks considering the co-op model, and it'll be really interesting to hear about how it's happened in Maine, but this is maybe it's self-promotion, but I can't emphasize the importance of pulling in good technical assistance. Co-ops are unique beasts. And we, there were plenty of questions that Margaret and I didn't have the answer to. And so we relied heavily on networks that we're a part of to try and get questions answered in this process.
Thank you so much, Kelly, for those insights. And yes, thank you. And thank you for mentioning the importance of involving co-op development professionals as you are exploring the cooperative option. So thank you, Kelly. Next up, we have Brian Brashow. He is the Assistant Director of Cooperative Forestry, the Wood Innovations line within the USDA Forest Service. So Brian, yeah, you're originally from Wisconsin, so we're excited to have you on, and please take it away.
I am. Thank you very much. Much appreciated. I'm Brian Brash. I'm in cooperative forestry, so it's a little different version of cooperative than we're talking about today. It's the partnership in the Forest Service with state, private, and tribal forestry. When most people think about the Forest Service, they often think about the National Forest System. So I grew up in Leona, Wisconsin. My dad worked for a hardwood lumber company, and his buddy was a district ranger for at the time, Nicolet National Forest in Leona, Wisconsin. So this connection between markets and forestry has been part of who I am, really. But just wanted to share a little bit about who the Forest Service is and what we do. Next slide, please. I lead a market development team within the Forest Service known as the Wood Innovations Program. Henry and Dana highlighted and outlined a variety of the challenges that we face across the country. But I think that we have a commitment. We have a commitment between industry and the Forest Service to do everything we can to build markets and strengthen industry. Why do we do that? It's really all about the health of our forests. Forests, there is a connection between forest management and forest markets. And those are the kinds of things that we're really focused on in our program. We're involved really across the supply chain. So that includes everything from biomass materials at the forest level, sawmill residues, and the value-added products that might be produced from them. And then one of the things that we are doing more and more is focused on wood in a commercial construction approach. So at one point in time, only about 5 years ago, the tallest timber building in the country was in Portland, Oregon at 8 stories. The tallest timber building in the country now is in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and it's 25 stories, 19 stories of wood on top of 6 stories of concrete. Next slide, please. This is that connection. Markets allow us to support forest management. When healthy forests really need markets for everything. Healthy industry needs markets for everything. And this isn't just about large, high-value saw logs, but this is really about the ability to manage our forests, that forest products support healthy forests. Markets matter and mills matter. And those are the kinds of things that I'm focused on. So I have training, both education training as a forester from Wisconsin Stevens Point, but also in wood products manufacturing and engineering over my entire career of moving things forward. Next slide, please. We have the Forest Service is investing in these product sectors, but it's really bigger than that. You know, mass timber is a significant emphasis for us because it's a new market. Historically, we've been building our homes from wood for 100 years, but most of our commercial buildings, especially those over 5 stories, end up being steel and concrete. So these are new markets for wood and for wood products. As we take round trees and convert them into rectangles, we also have residues. And so that's industrial residues from a manufacturing standpoint, a sawmill, but it's also forest residues that are byproducts of logging, tops and limbs, or in places, especially in the West, small and medium-sized trees that do not have a market and there are significant wildfire risk. So those are typically going to be forest thinnings. And one of the challenges with those forest thinnings is they are very expensive to remove. So the importance of markets is even more reinforced when we're really focused on thinning. We've expanded our work beyond simply softwood, pine or spruce, fir. We're spending more and more time in the hardwood sector. And we know that in the eastern half of the United States, the hardwood lumber and hardwood products is incredibly important as a part of active forest management. The logging sector, none of this happens without loggers. And I think that's the part that I heard Dana talk about. 40% of logging capacity in New England Northeast has been lost. You know, those are challenges that we're facing nationally. So the Forest Service has entered into a memorandum of understanding with the American Loggers Council, which is the national logging association, of which each state, I think over 40 states, are part of that with their own individual associations. So the logging sector is incredibly important, and it is the tool that allows us to accomplish the forest management goals that we have in mind. And I think that that's something that we just have to remind ourselves, is that without loggers, none of this happens. So the potential for timber professional cooperatives, which include loggers, I think is incredibly valuable. We have a number of other programs that we're continue to be involved with, and I think communications is important. I think that we need to help understand the important connection between markets and forest management. We have to understand why forest management is important. Why is that an important part of what we do? So there's been some really good work done that I would encourage people to look at. State of Wisconsin, Into the Outdoors, as last year had 4 episodes. They're really helping educate the importance of communications. We've been involved with a series, PBS and Amazon Prime series, known as America's Forest with Chuck Leavell. Most people would think of Chuck Leavell as the keyboardist for the Rolling Stones, but he's also a tree farmer in Georgia. And so I do think that it's important for us to continue to inform and educate and provide an important understanding of this sector. You know, over 2 million Americans are employed directly and indirectly by the forest product sector. So it is incredibly important. And for a kid who grew up in a 5th generation company, forestry and wood products company, it's incredibly important for us to continue to think about that as we go forward. Next slide, please. This is just a map of our investments. So the forest products industry is across the country. It's in Alaska, it's in Hawaii, it's in Puerto Rico, and it's in all of the other states that we continue to be engaged with. We have multiple grant programs that we fund annually to provide investments. There's challenges in this sector. You know, over 200 facilities have closed over the last couple of years, 24 months, and even more significantly if you go back in a decade or so. So this is part of the Forest Service's commitment to invest. Secretary Rollins announced back in July our investments for the 2025 fiscal year, and you can see that we have 3 different programs. Each program has a little bit better, a little different characteristics, but you can see that we really are in places where forests exist across the country. Next slide, please. What's next? So what's coming up next is dependent. You know, I just got to put this caveat out there because I'm not announcing a program. Our notice of funding opportunities are dependent upon administration, department approval, and funding availability. So, but we are hopeful that in middle of October, so for those of you less familiar with the wood products industry, National Forest Products Week starts October 19th through 25th. And so I know for people like Dana and Henry and myself and others, every week is Forest Products Week for us, but only once do we get, once a year do we get a presidential proclamation. So that's typically the week that we would make these the notice of funding opportunity or the request for proposals and other terms available. We will communicate this information broadly. Just about everybody is eligible, private industry, for-profit, tribes, governments, and it probably should say very specifically and very clearly here, cooperatives. So these grant programs are open to cooperatives in the forestry sector. However, if you take a step back to 2022, we received some funding direction, and that funding direction gave us money for our Wood Innovation Grant program. And it also had a carve out, and it specifically asked us to fund $2 million for timber professional cooperatives. So we reached out, we did a request for information. We identified 2 cooperatives, the Timber Professionals Cooperative, which Henry and Margaret and Kelly talked about in Wisconsin and Michigan, and the Maine Forest Stewardship Cooperative, which Dana talked a little bit about in Maine. So those are the programs that we chose to fund in 2022. So each of those organizations received $1 million to advance their work. And that's some of the places that we are really at right now, is that those cooperatives are moving forward. And I think that might be, I got 2 more slides. So next slide, please. So we're going to continue to work on that, and as we get forward, but there's other things that our team does. And this is, I think, another piece of information is we understand this industry. We are boots on the ground. We may be out working with manufacturers, with producers, or even on the construction job site. So there's a lot of things that our national team is involved with. We have 14, 15 individuals. Both I represent our national office, but I'm based in Duluth, Minnesota. But we have place-based geographic expertise across the country, and these are really great folks who can provide a lot of assistance. And the key in any of our grant programs is early and often engagement with these folks, because they will help ensure that the applications are put in place the right way. I just had one question this morning that I followed up on. We had an applicant, they probably applied for the wrong program. And because they applied for the wrong program, they weren't eligible. And they never checked in advance to see exactly, we just got the application. So early and often, this is a valuable, valuable team. And the last slide is really a closing slide that I just think that we have to kind of continue to think about all of the people that work in these sectors, that there is expertise, that this represents about 98, 99% of the wood using industry across the country, from loggers to producers. So I think those are the kinds of important messages that we have to think about all the time. I think that was it. Thank you.
Excellent. Yes, thank you, Brian. Thank you for that great overview. It was short, but you covered a lot of territory. Thank you for that. Next up, we have Laura Delaney, and she is the liaison for the Timber Professionals Cooperative that you've heard so much about. Laura herself is a logger, multi-generational logger, so I will turn it over to you.
Hi, Margaret. Thank you all for coming. It's really nice to be here. I took the position with the cooperative a little bit later after everyone had already done a lot of the groundwork with Dennis and you guys putting together the bylaws and doing all of that. And then they came along and said, hey, we need somebody to kind of fit the role of liaison, which is, why they gave that title. Let's join everybody together because we're all stronger together. So a little bit of the working routine that you normally would do isn't what I've found is super successful with the cooperative, but being out there with everyone, like Brian was just saying, and early and often and talking with people and moving it forward that way has seemed to be what works. We have a board of directors that are fully engaged and everyone is behind what we're doing, working with the different groups like GLTPA, who has a lot of input in what we do, bringing everyone together, being able to talk to Margaret, Kelly, everyone else. And I guess bridging the gap between the loggers and the truckers to help us provide more markets for ourselves is basically the goal of cooperative, and so for us to do that together and have everyone on board with it. We have 56 members in the cooperative right now, which is the TPCE cooperative, and then there's still 88 members in TPC cooperative. So it's just still a little bit confusing because we have the two, but TPCE is very close to completing the purchase on the mill, the chip mill in Tillida. And like I said, just working together, that has been our complete goal, and it's working.
Laura, would you mind sharing with us, you were to acquire the mill, obviously equity capital was needed. Could you tell a little bit about the journey that you took to, Henry likes to talk about you as being the spur in the saddle to move things forward.
Um, to put the when we started with the solicitation agreement for the mill, I found it very unique. You don't being in the profession myself, if someone calls you and asks you, you just kind of say, oh yeah, I'll get to that later, right? Because I'm in the woods, or I'm doing this, or I'm in my truck on the way to the mill. You know, you have to go to them. You have to go to them, and you have to, okay, oh, you're in the woods. Guess what? Well, I'm on my way to you. Do you have your checkbook in your truck today? Because I would like you to become a shareholder of this fantastic cooperative that we are trying to move forward. Um, you know, it's one of those things. I think I talk to Dennis almost on a daily, and Dennis is in his truck or in his machine, and one conversation takes 6 phone calls just to get through it because we're both in such a remote area. But, you know, I you're walking through the woods and you find somebody in their forwarder and you say, oh, well, hey, take me along for a little ride, and you talk to them and you give them your spiel and away you go. So moving us forward together.
Laura, you're being a little shy. Could you share with us how much money you've raised to help
uh
purchase that mill?
$418,000 today.
And that is no easy feat given what's going on in the industry and how hard pressed some of the loggers and the truckers are after the closure of all these mills. So, Laura, hats off to you.
Thank you. The Wisconsin Rapids mill closure was something that hit home for all of us. I mean, literally, that's my parents have been, were 54 years. They've been in business for 54 years, and they were one of the top 5 suppliers at the Verso mill. So when the mill went out, it hit everybody. And these gentlemen and ladies that brought the cooperative together were there to try to save everything that we've all worked so hard for. So, when Dennis said, hey, we want you to come on and help, I mean, and Don always was quick to call and say, could you help us with this? And I would always say, well, you're the hardest person to say no to. But bringing everyone together that way and working on it together for what we all believe in, I mean, it's the best part. So it's a good thing to be the boots on the ground. I don't mind at all. Or the spurs, as Henry always says. Dennis
Thank
is
you for
on the
that.
call if you have any questions for Dennis. I know Dennis is here.
Excellent. I don't know if Dennis can, I don't know if we're able to unmute him. We might bring him on for the Q&A session. So
I was able to find Dennis if you'd like to say something. Dennis, go ahead.
Oh, okay. I'm on. Yeah, I
Oh,
guess
sorry.
Laura, can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
yes,
Okay, so Laura doesn't talk enough about herself because she has been quite a spark plug that we needed. You know, we were kind of struggling with that. We're all busy, and we knew we had to find that right person, and that Laura has been that right person. She said Don was a hard person to say no to. Well, so is she. And she's proved that in what she's done there. So, but I mean, what's nice about working with Laura is that she believes in what we're trying to do 100%. She's part of us. I mean, we're all, like she said, we're all in this together. So it's been a wonderful opportunity to work with Laura and just have her on board and have her do what she's done for the cooperative. So I look forward to moving forward with all the projects we got going. So we're not stopping here, and she knows that. We talked this morning about that. So we're not stopping at one. This is a good start. So thank you, Laura, and thank you to everyone.
Thanks, Dennis.
thank you. This is a wonderful conversation, and now I want to turn it to Scott Maiden. He's the president of the Maine Forest Stewardship Cooperative, and for an update of what they're doing in the fine state of Maine. I'm not sure if Scott is able to unmute.
How about now?
Oh, perfect. Thank you, Scott.
Okay,
Go right
you can hear
ahead.
me now. All
Yes.
right. Well, I'm Scott Madden, and along with my wife and I, we own and operate Madden Timberlands here in Maine. Just a small logging company with about 20 employees. We've been in business for 47 years. Second generation. Come from a long line of family. Still have 3 nephews, 2 great nephews, a son, and 2 grandsons that we're trying to find a future home for. So that was what really led us to the co-op. So as I think you mentioned before, I am the president of the Maine Forest Stewardship Cooperative, which we were formed in 2021 just to provide small businesses in the forest products industry with an opportunity to join for group investment, group purchasing. In 2020 was when we really saw our big downturn. When Dana alluded to it earlier, we lost the J mill. But the last 15 years have been equally as challenging. We've seen 7 large pulp and paper facilities shut down in our area. So it's just taken, millions of tons off the market, and we're, looking for any opportunity that we can to bring it back. So when we first heard about this cooperative, it was very interesting, and with the help of you and Brian, we were able to get it off the ground. In Maine, there are other, examples of cooperatives, that have worked and they've done, pretty well. The Associated Grocers, Cabot Creamery, the Maine Lobster Cooperative, just to name a few. And one of our goal was to invest in startups, and to maybe entice some new startups to look here in the Northeast to come. And, we've made some headway. We'll have to see where those go, but we've also done the same thing. And maybe Laura wants to come to Maine and help us kick the tires here to see if we can raise some more money here for opportunities to, for some wood consuming facilities ourselves. We also looked at a chip site at one point. But again, like I said, that I really got to thank both you, Margaret, and Brian, for bringing that to us. It's where it's come. We don't have a tremendous amount to share, but we're still very excited, and it's good to hear that the USDA, wants to keep this program moving forward, because it is going to be, and it was said earlier, that most places are just looking for a profit, and I am at the point. Most all of our loggers in most all the loggers, period. I don't have to say in the Northeast. Most all loggers now, we're really just looking for a future, for the generations to come behind us.
So well
And that's
said,
all I have.
Scott. Thank you. Oh, thank you. Thank you for sharing that. And it's exciting, some of the opportunities that both you and Brian talked about of different opportunities for the use of the wood that is being harvested. So thank you for that. Thank you for your good work in the Northeast. As mentioned, as both Laura and Scott mentioned, these type of projects require quite a bit of capital. As you can imagine, a mill is no easy lift. And so we wanted to bring along Carrie Sabel. She is a business and cooperative program specialist with the USDA Rural Development in Wisconsin. And she has been working very closely with Laura Delaney, with Dennis and Henry, with the Timber Professionals Cooperative and Timber Professionals Cooperative Enterprises to help provide part of the capitalization package for acquiring this mill and other opportunities. So the floor is yours, Carrie.
Thank you, Margaret. Appreciate the invitation today to be part of this group. Such a group, as you can hear, the passion each of them speak with. So feel really honored to be with everyone today. One of the programs I would like to mention today, our Timber Production Expansion Guaranteed Loan Program. That's a mouthful, TPEP for short. And part of a joint effort, or as Brian mentioned, a partnership. Partnership matters. And RBCS is partnering with the Forest Service on this. Next slide, please. A historic partnership, actually, that the U.S. Forest Service has asked RBCS to work with them on. This program, it has some roots here in the president's executive order, and between the president and the Secretary Rollins, working quite hard to get this story out. This program provides financial support to qualified lenders. Again, it's a guarantee. The lenders make the loan, and we come in with a guarantee to those loan applicants who want to establish, reopen, expand, or improve a sawmill or other wood processing facility. So it gives you some idea of some of the basis of the programs. Next slide, please. So how does TPEP work? We at RBCS are running this through our 1RT Guaranteed Loan Initiative, and it mirrors our Business and Industry, or BNI, Guaranteed Loan Program, and our regulations are based in Part 5001. Maximum loan is 25 mil, so we can do quite a good sized program with no minimum. So we've seen a wide range of those dollars there. No annual fees or guarantee fees, which is also quite a benefit. for those businesses that are applying to have no fees involved with them. It offers the lender and the client a 90% guarantee. That's pretty large, and so really can make an impact to not only a local bank, but also for its clients. Maximum term is 30 years. And it can be used as part of the capital stack with other loans and grants. As Brian mentioned, there's some other U.S. forestry grants that it certainly can be used in conjunction with. And the website listed there for TPEP for lots more details. Next slide, please. So basically, this goes back to, as I mentioned, a partnership with Forestry. U.S. Forestry, as Brian mentioned, does and has worked with grants over multiple years, but not done the guaranteed lending. So looking to increase that partnership by working with RBCS, and some of their funding that came through the Jobs Act and the Infrastructure Investment Act. One of the definitions here, ecosystems restoration. What does that really mean? Again, we're getting back to establish, reopen, expand, or improve a sawmill or other facility. Also needs to identify in a geographic area as high or very high priority for ecological restoration, okay? And that is by using those byproducts from that unit of land. So keep in mind, as Brian also alluded to, this is a pilot program, first of its kind. The money was put out there under past legislation. And so once that money is used up, then as Brian mentioned, we'll see what the next offering is for funding. Next slide, please. So the ultimate recipients, again, engaged in or proposing to engage in, and I keep going back to establish, reopen, retrofit, expand, or improve. Those are the key words that you would need as an ultimate recipient to be eligible. A wood processing facility here, a little bit about what that means, either solid wood products, engineered wood products, biomass, fuel products, those kinds of things. Next slide, please. Eligibility, applicants, again, quite a wide range. Individuals, organizations, tribes, co-ops, partnerships, LLCs, a business engaged in the business, okay? The project, the guaranteed loan funds can be used. Again, I'm going back, sounding like a dead horse here, beating a dead horse. Establish, reopen, expand, improve. Okay, key phrases to keep in mind. Again, the proposal or either a proposed or an already established facility. Next slide, please. A live link here there at the top of the slide that takes you to the ArcGIS map that Forestry Service developed and used to target and tell you what those high and very high priority areas are. It's a relatively new dashboard, and it's used for these kinds of products. So again, a very high level overview. And so with that, Margaret, back to you.
Very good. Thank you, Carrie, and thank you for this information. Hopefully it will be of service to others. And then our final speaker is James Mayer. He is the Vice President Commercial Lender at Abbey Bank, which has been in conjunction with USDA Rural Development with the loan guarantee for the Timber Professionals Cooperative proposed chip mill in Tillida. So welcome, Jim.
Thanks, Margaret, and thanks for inviting me to be on the panel, and thanks everybody for your time today. I was introduced to this project through Peter Tillman, who is the Executive Director of Shawano County Economic Progress, our local economic development arm, and he had actually gotten this as a referral from one of his counterparts who Dennis had reached out to. And the first meeting I had, Peter brought Laura in, and Laura explained the project. And, you know, initially, let's face it, chip mills aren't exactly high on a bank's wish list. But once, you know, you meet Laura and you heard what she was doing for raising money, read the business plan, read the stock offering memorandum, and I've got to meet Dennis, you know, on the board. And, you know, community banks, by and large, do take the extra time to look beyond, this doesn't quite fit a box, but let's see if we can make it fit the box. Now, with a cooperative structure, you know, it's rather unique because, you know, Laura said she raised $418,000, so she's got well over 800 people. Nobody owns over 20%, so we can't get personal guarantees as that secondary source of repayment. So we have to rely on, number one, the business cash flow, and then number two would really be the sale of collateral, which banks never like to use that as a source of repayment. So enter the USDA TPEP guarantee. And once Carrie explained the program, Peter sent some information to me. Laura provided some information on the program. And, you know, so we're saying, well, okay, we don't have personal guarantees, but we have this backstop just in case the meteor strike happens. You know, it's what we talk about in banking. But it still really comes down to the underwriting the fundamentals. And, you know, the 5 C's of credit and capital was talked about. Now, it's pretty impressive to raise $418,000 for this project and look at what the cash reserves would be in case something goes wrong, what the down payment is. You know, from a collateral position, we're fine. Capacity, the business plan is good. Cash flow is, you know, projected to be strong. But without that USDA guarantee, this deal probably doesn't get done. And the fact that the TPEP program offers the no origination guarantee fee and the no ongoing fee is such a benefit for the cooperative itself, not having to worry about an extra cash flow expense. And as Brian talked about, the forestry grant, my goodness, what a great thing that is. While they couldn't use it to purchase fixed assets, they could use it for a bunch of startup expenses that didn't have to come out of that $418,000 capital raise. So, you know, we were able to, as a bank, and there's 3 slides in here, and I won't go through them, talks about our mission, our vision, our core values, our community impact, how we give back to the community, and how our bank does financially over, you know, 57-year history here. But in doing this almost 4 decades, I've never run across a deal like this. So it's kind of neat to be able to work on this. But it's also neat to be working for a community bank that does what the name says. We support the community. We're looking at this as a good thing for the area, for the workers, for the cooperative itself. And how can we use that as a way to give back and support our community? Whereas some other, you know, banks would just probably say, nope, doesn't fit the box, doesn't check this. Let's just move on. So it's just been a real pleasure. Carrie has been great to work with, explaining different things. And here's what we need. And Laura, you know, getting the stuff that we need to get to Carrie and that we needed for our underwriting. So this is just a great project. And it's, again, how everybody can work together, from the government guarantee program to the liaison, to the board, to our board, and just the local bankers. So it's just been a great opportunity for us, and we're just thrilled to be a part of it.
Thank you so much, Jim. And you really said it well, what community banks are all about, and that coming together. Thank you. Thank you for what you're doing for the Northwoods. So with that, why don't we open it up? We are doing well with time, And now the Interagency Working Group for Cooperative Development has a twofold purpose. It is to introduce to other federal agencies what the cooperative model is and what it can do. And the second goal is also for other agencies, other federal agencies, to share what resources they have that could be of use to the cooperative development community. So with that in mind, we heard quite a bit from Brian with the U.S. Forest Service. Thank you for that, and thank you for taking the time to carefully explain that. Um, I'm wondering if I could put on the spot Hillary Abell with the Department of Labor. I don't know, Hillary, if you are still on the line and so inclined to unmute yourself.
Yes, hello, Margaret. Hi, yes, I am still here. This has been a fascinating discussion. Everybody, my name is Hillary Abell, and I'm the Chief of the Division of Employee Ownership within the U.S. Department of Labor. That's a new division started just over the last couple of years. And our mission is to promote employee ownership of businesses, including through worker cooperative and cooperative models. And the main project that I'm working on right now is launching a clearinghouse of information about the various forms of employee ownership, including cooperatives, and about employee participation. So that clearinghouse, I am hoping will go live in the next couple of months, and certainly before the end of this calendar year. I would be delighted to connect with folks at the Cooperative Services. It's been a little while since I have, but we know each other well. And about this opportunity within the forestry sector. It sounds very, very exciting. I learned so much today. And I am here as a resource for folks interested in employee ownership and looking at transitioning businesses to employee ownership. And I know that the cooperative models talked about today have an element of employee ownership potentially and other types of stakeholders in ownership. So no barrier there that I can see. I would love to learn more and to be a resource if I can be helpful, although there's clearly a lot out there through the USDA. Thank you so much.
Very good. Thank you, Hillary. Are there any other federal partners that would like to share a few thoughts?
Feel free to raise your virtual hand and I'll go ahead and unmute you. Thank you.
We might also, Brian Brashow, do you have any other thoughts that you would like to share, especially after hearing all the speakers?
Yeah, hi, everybody. I think that the forest products industry is really important to the country. It's important for land management. It's important for economic opportunities, and it's a sustainable, renewable resource that I think we can be really proud of. So I think that, I've been working with entrepreneurs and businesses and companies for a long time throughout my career. And I think that, we're in a place where we're facing a lot of challenges, but we're trying to do it together. And that's where a lot of those partnerships that we've identified through associations or through individual businesses are important. And there's folks that we have worked with, government has worked with for probably decades of ongoing engagement and ongoing involvement. And I think that resource is important. So I think one of the things that we really try to do within my Forest Service programs is to make connections, to put people in touch with other people as they're building relationships. So that's where having a relationship with Don Peterson for 20 years was, I think, incredibly important to many of the folks on this call. And sadly, he passed a couple of years ago, but we're thankful for those kinds of relationships as we go forward. So those are some of the things that are out there. Our ongoing technical assistance is available now through our team or through we have both. If anybody's involved in a wood energy program, we have a wood energy technical assistance team. So that if somebody's looking at converting to a wood-fired heating system, we're not talking about single-family homes, but businesses, institutions, facilities. There's a team out there that can do that at really at no cost. And then we're We're providing some assistance through a wood manufacturing assistance team. Really, that's, it's a sawmill assistance team or a wood products manufacturing assistance team, where again, we're offering expertise to try to support, because for those of us that have lost industry in the places that we live, it's a lot to rebuild and to restart. It's a lot easier to keep the folks that we have and help them grow. And the Wisconsin Rapids mill that closed. I think it was referenced that it wasn't the only one that day. The other one was Duluth, Minnesota, where I live, and we saw that mill has now restarted, but it's using recycled materials, so it's not really helping active management to forests. So those are just a few additional comments. I think that I'm just really impressed. I mean, heck, we had 175 people at one point on the call. Awesome. And much appreciated to USDA Cooperative Services.
Very good. Thank you, Brian. Thank you. Well, why don't we turn to Robbie is willing to help with some of the questions that came in the chat. I haven't been monitoring it as well as I should have been. So why don't we, Robbie, if you wouldn't mind sharing some of the questions, and some of our speakers can go ahead and share their expertise.
Sure. And some of these may have been answered in the chat, but we like to go over them for the recording for, someone to refer to later or who wasn't able to attend. And Joseph asked, does the lost production the speakers are discussing equal lost market or demand, or is that former demand being satisfied by other providers, nationally or internationally?
Brian, you want to take a stab at that?
Yes, I think it's all of the above. I think we've seen market substitution. Okay, so the hardwood sector, we now see materials for wood flooring that look like wood flooring, but they are not made out of wood any longer. We've seen a change in the way that we use paper. I think that was referenced by a few folks, and we've seen transitions there. So market loss has been due to market substitution. It's been due to, in some cases, economics and other considerations. So there's been a lot of things that have gone into it, but it has an impact, and all of those kinds of things. So there may be some others that want to comment as well.
No one else is going to comment. I know that Hillary had asked a quick fact check on the Wisconsin mills. The Consolidated Co-op and Park Fall Mills Co-op were not able to purchase the mills in Wisconsin Rapids or Park Mills. If so, will TPCE have the potential to incorporate any of the workers involved in those mills? And she apologizes for not knowing the geography. So, and Kelly, I think you answered that, and Margaret answered it in the chat.
Yeah, and I will just offer, I think I mentioned that the, Wisconsin Rapids Mill in particular had employed 900 people because our center is connected into the kind of economic development network. There was a Connecting Entrepreneurial Communities conference held in Wisconsin Rapids earlier in the summer, and tremendous amount of work has been done since 2020 to help that community from an economic standpoint after the loss of that mill, and help all those people, find other work and other things. But just with the time lapse, yeah, those folks have moved on.
And the same with Park Falls. And it is both of those sites are quite distant from the chip mill location. We're excited about the chip mill location. It's not too far from Green Bay. It's got good transportation lines, and it has the possibility to expand. There's quite a bit of acreage, possibility to expand to do something similar to what Boysaco did with, start small, build up reserves, reinvest, and hopefully be able to expand for the benefit of the entire industry.
expansion is definitely expansion is definitely the mission there. There's almost 50 acres there, and to move into different markets so that we can utilize the most roundwood that we can in that area, that is exactly what our plan is. So in moving forward, that mill is actually shuttered. It is not staffed because it has been shuttered since September of last year. So we are working, they just decided that they were done. So, but a lot of the staff that was there to begin with does want to come back on board. They are, I mean, I guess they've bought into the mission of a cooperative and what the benefits are of them working with us and growing and being the original staff that's there and helping us with an expansion process.
Thanks. And just want to let you know that Darren did put in the chat, there is a feedback for the interpreter. If you see that link and would like to enter your feedback, that'd be wonderful. Mike had a question. Is there a market for balers to densify and enable the removal of limbs and tops from the logging sites for use as biomass feedstocks for biofuels or biopower?
I defer to the loggers first, but I do think that it's important that we have ultimately the demand for the products that can be manufactured from that material that's baled.
Okay. Next we have Catherine. Are there cooperative mills near, I'm sorry, I may pronounce this wrong, Accord, New York or Port Townsend, Washington? She's interested in connecting with forest thinning to use in building wall infill in her architectural projects. And she in the chat had said to reach out to her and connect with her and gave her email. Didn't know if anyone knows of any mills in that area.
Margaret, did you want to talk about?
I do not know of. I know of a home care co-op up in Port Townsend, Washington, but not forestry. Go ahead.
What I'll say is that when the Forest Service did a request for information on timber professional cooperatives, we really identified two that were formed and viable, and those are the two that you heard from today. So there's other organizations that have explored or talked about within the wood product sector, but none that I'm overly familiar with. I will re-put into the chat for kind of the connections. Our Wood Innovations page on the left, there's a contacts, and it'll go by state, and it'll allow for a connection, whether it be directly to a cooperative or other connections to the forest products industry.
Thanks. And Christy had asked, can you provide a list of participating TPEP lenders? And Carrie Sabo had said that she can get a link and we can follow that up with our presentation that we'll email out to everyone so people have that list. The next question was, would establishing a new mill as opposed to repurposing or reopening a mill be a good model for a cooperative? Which I would say any business is good for a cooperative. I think Margaret would agree. But if anyone wants to elaborate on that.
What was the specific scenario again?
Would establishing a new mill as opposed to repurposing or reopening a mill be a good model for a cooperative?
I don't know that I can say yes or no. I think what would be important is to do a lot of due diligence around the feasibility of it. I mean, I think establishing a new mill, I imagine, you're looking at a lot of capital, right? Even if it's relatively small. And so are you in an area, both through the folks who might be members of that cooperative, supporters of that cooperative, where you can reasonably pull that capital together without having so much debt that it's an untenable debt load for whatever the operations of that mill might look like. So just like with any other business, a co-op needs to do a lot of feasibility studies, business planning, a lot of important due diligence just to make sure that the business proposition itself is going to be viable.
And tagging on to what Kelly said, I think that, doing the due diligence, doing the good business modeling, but combining that with an ownership mentality that is going to be in it for decades, for, hopefully for generations. Like a number of the loggers that are here on the panel, they're multi-generation family businesses. That type of mentality, I think, would be a win-win for everyone involved in the industry.
And if I may break in real quick, Dennis would like to contribute here. Dennis, if I'd like to unmute yourself, sir.
Yeah, thank you very much. So, as I listen, I have a lot of thoughts on this because I've gone through it. And the repurposing is, we found, we've talked about that. It's just starting a new place of our own. First of all, the permitting would take years. And then a site prep is very costly, as was mentioned by Kelly. But, the fact that we can take something old and make it new again is awful intriguing. And, of course, you have to do all the due diligence, which we've done. This is I don't know if this is, let's see, we're in year 2025. So I'm on this project for over 5 years. It doesn't even hardly seem possible. But 5 years of my life has been spent digging into all this stuff, and it's been quite a journey. And we found that turning something, we like to refer to it as a diamond in the rough. That's how we like to think about it. So, there's many tools in the old place that we can put to use and refurbish again and move on from there. So that was our determination with that. The cost is absolutely the determining factor there, and that it can get quite costly in that. I would want to, if I can go back just a couple questions with that baler question, that's been done. It's been talked about. I know there's balers out there. The fact is that they're, I guess, it's kind of cost prohibitive. The baler itself is quite costly. I mean, I do chips myself in the woods, but it's cost prohibitive to get this expensive equipment to get the baler. It's kind of a unique way to do it. I've liked the concept. It's kind of efficient, but it does become costly. You have to weigh the cost of all that as well. Biomass just isn't worth a whole lot. So that was the problem with that. But I do like the concept of the baling the brush and the twigs in the woods. So if that makes any sense at all. But that's where my thoughts were on that, especially the old to new mill. I mean, especially our site there in Tillida was very conducive for what we want to do. It's very centrally located in Wisconsin, and there is a lot of acreage there. So that was all taken into consideration with where we headed with it.
Thank you, Dennis. Yeah. Kenneth asked, are there untapped uses for timber? Can timber products replace steel at all since tariffs on steel have increased? An example might be large ships. Could wood fiber composites be used for roads? Let's innovate.
I'll grab it. I think that we have continued to see innovations in the wood products industry. 10 years ago, we only had a handful of homes and we had no manufacturing businesses for this product called cross laminated timber. Think of it as plywood on steroids, 2x6 construction lumber, flat laminated into stacks. We now have 13 manufacturing plants across the country. We have 2,500 commercial, institutional, multifamily buildings that have been built. We could, by building code, build 15,000 buildings a year. So if we get to a couple thousand a year, I'm going to be thrilled. That same cross-laminated timber is often used for industrial applications, i.e. wood roads, but those are wood roads for construction, right? Matting or temporary platforms for cranes, etc., to reduce the load on the soil. There are innovations, there's products that are coming. We hope to see them sooner than later. Biochar is one. It's a roasted wood chip that is high carbon, and it has applications in agriculture, horticulture, filtration, and we think eventually industrial products could be even an additive into asphalt or concrete to enhance performance and to reduce the carbon footprint of those materials. Sustainable aviation fuels are another opportunity that we're going to continue to see as we look very carefully across the country to incorporate biomass into aviation fuels. So that's across agriculture, both agricultural plants, but also woody biomass. There's the opportunities for biochemicals. We're seeing innovations in packaging and materials for recyclable cups and other materials. So we've seen the paper industry innovate to really high performance packaging products. So those are just a couple of things I think that you're going to continue to see. The possibilities are great. The challenge is always going to be, will somebody buy it? And can you make it at a price that somebody can buy it? But I think we're going to see a lot of great stuff happening to continue in timber construction and in some of our work in biofuels and biochemicals and other bio-based products.
Thanks, Brian. Naomi asks, are there any strong examples of new forestry cooperatives in the southern region?
Not that I'm aware of. There's been,
what I'm aware of in
cooperatives.
Yeah, what I'm familiar with in the southern region, I've heard of some of the logging truckers do a shared services type of co-op for purchasing fuels, for having fuel stations, that type of thing, cooperatively owned.
The Southern Cooperative. Sorry,
Yeah,
Margaret.
go ahead, Laura. Go ahead.
The Southern Cooperative, it does have loggers and truckers in the cooperative, but it is ag based. So it has the, actual farmers and everyone is involved together.
And that's more for fuels and
for the fuel and tires and all of the extras. I guess it's not actually just specific for for sharing in those costs, not like purchasing a mill or any timber industry related stuff that way. Didn't mean to interrupt you, Margaret.
No, I that was my understanding as well. Thanks for that clarification, Laura.
Great. Okay. Bill had asked if we had a community that was ready to explore reopening or establishing a mill using a co-op model, who would we reach out to first for technical assistance? Would we start with state rural development staff, someone at USDA Cooperative Services, or someone else who can provide technical assistance at a startup phase? My answer would be all three, but I'll let the other experts, you can reach out to us at coopconnect@usda.gov. I would probably put you in touch with Kelly because I know that she has worked obviously with forest cooperatives, but that doesn't mean there isn't another one near you that may be of assistance. What's great about our cooperative development centers is they all work amicably together. As you heard Kelly say earlier, and Margaret, they reached out to other centers for different assistance with different parts of the TPC project. So, it takes a lot of people to make everything work. And and you also have to find someone that I feel is a fit for you, as well, that good connection.
I'll echo
Yeah.
what you're saying, Robbie, just that, Margaret and I, and well, my center, the Center for UW Center for Co-ops, we're part of this national network of co-op development centers that is very collaborative and does a lot of information sharing, and we do a lot of referring, people based on, geography or, a specific type of co-op they're looking to form. I'll also emphasize that the co-op, every state has its own co-op statutes, and so that, geographical piece, whether, maybe you work with a developer for a personality fit in one place, but working with folks that know the co-op laws and things in your state is really important, because each state does have differences.
Well said, Kelly.
Yeah, and I also saw in the chat that the Cooperative Development Institute serves the Northeast, and they wrote that they would be willing to help out on a regional basis there.
Yes, thank you for pointing that out. All right. Kenneth asks, could scraps of wood be bagged and sold for campfires?
Yes. Although
Great
I would
answer.
encourage, I would encourage each state has some regulations around firewood and firewood production. So I would encourage you to talk to your representative state agency around that, because there is issues around phytosanitation, i.e. invasive insects like emerald ash borer.
And Catherine, with your question earlier about Port Townsend area, Cole had said if you haven't connected with Chickadee Forestry or Mallory, I might butcher this, Weinheimer, that might be a good starting point for Port Townsend area. Okay, and sorry, I'm scrolling now through, see if there's questions. And this is Cole again. He said, hi folks, Cole Jensen from the Rural Voices for Conservation Coalition. Just want to appreciate the cooperative folks and the whole widespread of federal partners on this call for sharing this info and supporting this important concept. Excited to follow what you all accomplish. And then Gladys asked, or stating, basalt or composite bridges, would they be considered?
Yeah, I dropped a note just a little bit farther.
Okay, sorry.
There is work in cellulosic or wood-based nanomaterials as an additive to concrete, and it has potential for both concrete and bridges, but it's a complicated approval process, and ultimately we got to scale up production as well.
All right. And Karen is asking, are there exciting relationships? Do you have any examples for interagency models working with veterans or related organizations with the Department of Defense and Services?
I'm not clear if that is related to the forest products industry or if that is the interagency in general, working with VA and
Forest Service is working with Department of Defense to open up additional opportunities for domestic wood species to replace imported wood species for things like pallets and truck decking and truck floor. So there is some work going on between Department of Defense. The other thing that we're engaged with is on the construction of buildings on military bases. Cross-laminated timber is a very high performance product that can withstand that we've actually done blast testing with the Department of Defense to validate some of the performance around wood as a highly energy absorbing construction material.
That's amazing. And Karen did verify yes with forest products. And Colin put in a Port Townsend cooperative in the chat. Scott, I can't see, but is there any other hands raised? Anyone have any questions that they'd like to come off mute or put in the chat?
I don't currently see any hands raised, but we have a few moments here. If folks want to go ahead and raise that virtual hand and speak with the panel, that'd be great. I'll let you know though, Robbie, if something pops up, but right now it's clean.
Well, why don't we take this time? We've got about 10 minutes until we need to close. Would any of the panelists like to offer some final thoughts to bring to a close? Any words of wisdom? Lot of experience here. Any words of wisdom that you would like to share with the general public?
I will add the comment that as a lender or an organization that would be looking to utilize some of these programs, start these conversations very early on. As Laura can attest to, these things do take time. Just to get the co-op ready to become an organization and apply for assistance of whatever form takes time in and of itself. So I guess just, a comment, Jim and I have been chatting for many months, from the beginning, and it does take time. So I guess just, it's never too early, in my opinion, to reach out and ask that question or hey, might this work? It might not, but you won't know if you don't ask. So that would be my recommendation is start the process early. So
Coming off of that, it's been a good process working with Carrie and Jim, but I would like to let people know, just don't give up. It's not the easiest model to follow. It is something that is new. New is always scary, right? When we first start out, it's a little scary. But in going through this process, if you have, like, my board of directors is phenomenal. You have the people, Dennis and all the ones that support you, they're going to rally up behind you to keep you moving forward. And there's going to be a lot of bumps, right, Carrie? A lot of bumps. There's a lot of bumps when it comes down to the end. I mean, I know all the work that, Dennis and everyone put in the beginning to get the articles and all of that. That was a lot of work. But when we're moving through this process, that's also been a lot of, you're moving forward. I've called it completely being in the middle of it, because I've switched lenders. I followed Jim from place to, and then started the process with someone else, and then moved back when he came back to a different agency where I found him. It's just something where don't give up, because we can make it through.
Dennis,
So-
you follow up on
Well,
that. Yeah.
I must say, Margaret, it is good to see you, especially with your flowery background again. I miss that. But I just can't emphasize enough that when I said I've been in this for 5 years, and it has been 5 years, it's been a long 5 years. And to get to where we're at finally is quite exciting. But I don't know who all is listening, but I can tell you that it's very easy to get discouraged. And going through I don't know how many thousands of hours that we did Zoom time and in-person meetings, going through setting up the bylaws and all that. That was quite exhausting, and it's very easy to get discouraged. But don't. You got to stay positive. You got to look to the future, and you have to look forward beyond what the little box that you become. Just doing your own businesses. But I can tell you that it's been quite a journey. And with Margaret and Kelly, we spent many hours together doing this and setting this up. Yeah, but I can tell you that you just have to stay focused on the goal. It's almost like, and Henry always said that too. We have to stay focused. You have to push forward. You cannot get discouraged. And for us as loggers and truckers, I don't know of any more independent group because we don't like to share each other's knowledge, and we don't like to it's a very different concept for us to work together for an outcome. We all have our own way of doing business, and that's just the way it is. So it's been quite a unique journey. And I can tell you that there's not, in my peer group, there's not 100% of those that believe in what we're doing yet. There's always the skeptics in anything you do. But you can't pay attention to that. You have to stay focused on the goal, stay focused on the positives, and surround yourself with good people. And Laura and I have talked about that this morning, and Henry and I talk about it all the time, is that this is about building relationships. And the relationships that we have built along the way, to me, are phenomenal. With Brian and Kelly and Margaret, and the list goes on, Jim, and it's phenomenal. And it's quite, I never thought I'd be a part of anything like this, but here we go. So it's very exciting. And even the young group of the board members that we have on our TPC and TPCE boards that are engaged in it, it's quite exciting for me. I've been in this business for almost 50 years, and it's quite exciting to me to see some of the young guys that have all, I won't say bought in, but they've jumped on the idea of what we can do with this. And it's really, I don't know, gives you hope for the future. When there's so much negative around us, it's great to put positive into the equation as well and stay focused on that. So I thank everyone that's involved with our co-op and what we've done to get this far, and I look forward to what we can do in the future.
Very nice, Dennis. Well said. We do have one more question. Kenneth asks, and thank you for asking this question. What is the difference between a co-op and an ESOP?
A cooperative is a business. Yeah, a cooperative is a business that is co-owned by a group of people, in this case, a group of foresters or logging truckers. An ESOP is a pension fund within a business. You saw in the slides that I shared with Boisaco, and how there's full representation on the board of directors, and any profits at the end of the year go back to the member owners in proportion to use. With an ESOP, that's a pension fund. It's an employment benefit.
Yeah, ESOP there's the profit sharing piece, but not the shared governance piece. So it's not the broad, like one member, one vote, members involved in governance.
And with the co-op, you could get those returns yearly, where in an ESOP, you would do that when you retire, not necessarily yearly or month. Correct? Typically. Yeah. Okay.
Well said. Yes. Do our friends in Maine want to share any thoughts before we come to a close?
I think we're all set, Margaret. Great job today.
Great.
Yes.
Thank you,
Thank
everyone.
you.
And I just want to appreciate Margaret volunteering her time to moderate, because I knew she was in it from the beginning, and we sadly miss her here at USDA. And so just want to thank everyone that's taken time to attend and give their time to present. We really, truly appreciate it. Our next interagency meeting, we hope, will be around the end of October to kind of close out co-op month, and hope to bring that to you soon. And send us any questions you have. And thank you so much, everyone, for being here today.